There's a simple hack that will help you learn Blender faster, and it's one I don't see anyone else talking about. I like to call it the Single Vertex Challenge. And that's where you challenge yourself to start with a single vertex and then draw a simple 2D shape by using the fewest Blender tools possible. It might seem counterintuitive, but by limiting the number of skills you're trying to learn now, you'll learn them so much faster. Which is awesome because they're the same skills you'll need when you get to more complex 3D models later. So let's walk through this idea step by step. We'll start by drawing something random and then we'll move on to the challenge. So over in Blender, start a new file if you haven't already, and you'll have a default cube. It'll be pre-selected, but in case it's not for you, click once on it to select it, and then press X and click to delete it. Then press Shift and the letter A for the Add menu. We'd like to add a single vertex, but since that's not one of the default options, go to the Mesh menu and pick Plane. And we'll turn this into a single vertex in just a moment. Then on your number pad, press 7 for a top-down view. If you don't have a number pad, you can come up to the navigation gizmo and click on the Z, and that will jump you into a top-down orthographic view that we can use to constrain ourselves to only working on the 2D ground plane as we create our 2D shape. Now to stay in this view, you can roll your mouse wheel forward and backward to zoom in and out, and you can hold the Shift key on your keyboard and then hold down the center mouse button and move your mouse to pan your view around the model as needed. You can let go of the Shift key and that center mouse wheel. Now, as I mentioned in our Getting Started with Blender video, I highly recommend a 3-button scroll wheel mouse. But if you don't have a mouse or you're using a trackpad, you can move your cursor over to the icons on the right. The top one here that looks like a magnifying glass, click and hold down and move your cursor up and down and you'll be zooming in and away from the model. Then let go. And if you move your cursor over the hand, click and hold down and move your cursor around and you'll be panning your view. And then you can let go to stop panning. And if at any point you accidentally orbit into 3D space, just press 7 on the number pad or click the Z on the navigation gizmo to hop back over to your top orthographic view. Okay, so now we've got our 2D view. Now we need to limit the number of tools that we're going to use for the challenge. And for the single vertex challenge, let's limit ourselves to working only in edit mode, and then we'll only use the select, move, and extrude tools to draw our 2D shape. Now, we're going to start with something random just to get the basics down before we move into the challenge. So back over here in Blender, you're in object mode for this plane. And as you know from our Getting Started with Blender video, you can press G to move, S to scale, and R to rotate this entire object. But using those tools in object mode will transform all geometry together, which is useful, but not what we want for this example. So if you were following along with that and you're still in the middle of what you were doing, you can hit the escape key to let go of that operation in progress. Otherwise, if you already scaled or rotated it or something else, you can undo back by using Control-Z on a PC or Command-Z on a Mac until you get back to the plane as it was. Now, press the Tab key and that will get you into edit mode. And it's here in edit mode that you can transform or edit vertices, edges, or faces individually. And that's the key thing we want to learn in this tutorial. By default, the select tool is active and all of the geometry is selected. You can click once in gray space to deselect everything. You're also defaulted to vertex selection mode, as you can see up here. You can hover over and see that the select modes are vertex, edge, and face. But you'll never need to pick these buttons because you can press 2 to switch to edge selection mode, or 3 to switch to face selection mode, or 1 again to get back to vertex selection mode. So after pressing 1 for vertex selection mode, come over to the top left vertex and click once on it to select it. You can come to the top right vertex, click once on it, it will deselect the first one, and now you've picked that vertex. If you want to choose more than one vertex at the same time, hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, come back over to the top left one, click once on it, then you can let go of the Shift key and both of these two vertices are selected. Notice that a previously selected one is orange and the most recently selected one is white, but they are both selected. Now click once in gray space to deselect them both, so you can use the Shift key to select more than one at one time, or you can also click and drag a selection window around these top two vertices and let go, and you will select both at the same time. So now that we have the basics of selection figured out, let's use the Move and Extrude tools to experiment with drawing in 2D space. So press 1 for vertex selection mode, click once in gray space to deselect everything, and then click once on the upper vertex to select it. Then press X for the delete menu, and we want to delete vertices, so go ahead and select vertices here. And you will delete that vertex, but it seems like so much more went away. And that vertex was needed for the top edge to exist and the left edge to exist. So those two things went away. And then you needed those two edges for the face to exist. So that went away. So while you only deleted one vertex, it actually meant that those two edges and the face had to go as well. Now we want to delete these two vertices on the right. So go ahead and click and drag a selection window around both of them. Then press X on your keyboard and pick vertices to delete them both. And while it looks like everything is gone, you can see here that there's this small little black dot. So we have one single vertex remaining. And it's this single vertex that we'll use to draw in 2D. Again, we'll just experiment for now, but go ahead and click once on it to select the vertex, then press E for extrude, and move your mouse. And you're extruding a line away from the vertex. Click anywhere and you'll set down a new vertex, and an edge will have been drawn between the two vertices. Now by default, this new vertex is selected, which means you can press E again for extrude, move your mouse again, and now you're extruding a new edge, and click to set that down. And you can repeat this as many times as you'd like. E, move the mouse, click. E, move the mouse, click. Next, try this. Press G for the move tool. I like to think of it as G for grab, and move your mouse and click to set down the vertex. So in this case, you haven't drawn a new edge, but instead you moved the vertex, which changed the direction and length of the existing edge. Okay, so let's go ahead and undo back to the original vertex. So remember, that's Control Z on a PC or Command Z on a Mac as many times as you need to get back to the single vertex. Now we can be way more precise with these tools. For example, select this vertex and press E for extrude. Then press Y and move your mouse and you'll be locked in the Y direction. Move it up in the Y direction and then click to set it down. Then press E again and press X to lock it in the X direction, and move your mouse to the right in that direction and click to set it down again. This time press G and then press X again. So even with the move tool, that works too. You can lock it in the X direction, and you could either extend the edge further or shorten it along the X direction. Go ahead and click to set it down. Now as you extrude or move things, you can have dimensions in mind. We covered a lot about how to create accurate models complete with dimensions in another video here on our YouTube channel, and I definitely recommend you check that out. I've added a link in the description. But I wanted to pull out a few tips here for this example. So let's say you wanted to draw an edge with a specific length. Go ahead and click on the original vertex to select it, then press E for extrude and X for the X direction, and then over on your keyboard type 1 and press enter. By default, the 1 stands for meters, and so you've made that edge 1 meter long. Now, what if you want to work with other units? For example, you want to work in centimeters, or maybe you want an entirely different system like imperial units. How would you go about doing that? Well, over here on the right-hand side, there's an icon for scene properties. Go ahead and click on it. And there you'll find units. Go ahead and click to drop down the units menu. You'll see here that the unit system is set to metric. Now you could stick with the metric system, and then down here where it says length, if you wanted your base units to differ, click where it says meters to drop down the menu, and you could decide that when you type in a number like 1 or 10 or 100, that you want that to be in centimeters instead of meters, and you could switch that here. Or if you're like me, I'm in the US and we use a different unit system, you can come up to where it says unit system, drop the menu down and pick imperial, and then you have a choice here under length of base units. Click where it says feet and you could decide to keep it at feet, or in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to inches. So to follow along with me in this example, I recommend you switch to imperial and inches. Even if you're used to using metric units, you can always switch it back later. And so now with that same vertex selected, press E, and then press X for the X direction, type 48 and press enter, and you've extruded this edge 48 inches. Now let's say you wanted to continue drawing along, but you wanted it to line up with this top vertex here. How would you go about doing that? Well, that's where we can take advantage of the snapping feature in Blender. So up at the top of your viewport, there's a magnet icon. Go ahead and click on it. That will turn on snapping. And then just to the right, click on that button for the snapping menu. And in this case, we want to snap to a vertex, so pick vertex, then move your mouse off the menu and it'll go away. Now let's say we just wanted to extend this edge, we didn't want to extrude a new edge. Then with this vertex selected, press G, and then press X. And then as you're moving over, you won't be able to snap to anything, but if you move your cursor up on top of this vertex up here, notice that it will snap. So look at the vertex down low, it will snap in place so it's in line, and then go ahead and click to complete that operation. And now that vertex was extended all the way here till it snaps in line with that top vertex. Okay, so we've been slowly but surely drawing a rectangle here, But rather than drawing this last edge, there's actually a different trick we can do. So go ahead and take the select tool and click and drag a selection window around both of these vertices. So whenever you have two vertices, you can fill an edge in between them by selecting them both, which we've just done, and then press F for fill, and it will fill an edge between those two vertices. This can also work for filling faces. So whenever you have a closed loop of coplanar edges, you can select all of the edges. So go ahead and click and drag a selection window around all these vertices. Selecting these vertices will also pick up the edges, since the edges are defined by those vertices. Then press F for fill, and you will fill in a face. Okay, so there's only a couple more fundamental things I want you to know before I turn you loose on the challenge. So let's say that we wanted to draw a smaller rectangle here within this big rectangle. For example, let's say we want to draw one in this upper right corner. But we don't have any vertices on either of these edges to extrude from. Here's how we would solve that. Click once in gray space to deselect everything, then press 2 for edge selection mode, and click once on the top edge to select it. Then right click on it and pick the option at the top there for subdivide. Now it's not obvious because you're in edge selection mode, but press 1 on your keyboard to switch to vertex selection mode, and then click once on that new vertex there in the middle to select it. Now let's say that you want it to start further to the right. Press G for grab, and then you could press X and you'll lock it in the X direction. Or here's another tip. Go ahead and hit escape, and with that vertex selected, press G once and then G a second time, and now you're sliding this along the edge. Now of course we could have used X, but imagine this edge was oriented at an angle, so it wasn't in line with the Y or the X directions. Then pressing G twice to slide this vertex is going to be really helpful. So go ahead and slide it to the right a bit and click to set it down. Just note that pressing G twice will not only work when you have an edge at an angle, but it'll also work when you're sliding edges on angled faces. That might be more than you're ready for right now, but it will definitely help you later in 3D to learn the trick of using GG to slide vertices or edges along directions that don't line up with the X, Y, or Z coordinates. Okay, so back over here, let's go ahead and press E for extrude, and then Y to begin extruding down. And then you can go ahead and click anywhere, and you've now extruded that edge down. And then we want to extrude from this vertex so that the next edge will meet perfectly at this right edge. And that's a snapping thing. So let's go back up to the snapping menu, and let's switch now to edge. Then come back over to your Blender model, press E for extrude, X for the X direction, and then move your cursor onto this edge. You'll notice it snaps over there, and go ahead and click to set it down. Okay, so this is looking pretty good, but there is one problem I want to show you. So over at the top, go ahead and click once to select that top vertex. Press G for grab and move your mouse around, and this is a good thing. We've connected up the geometry, so when we move this vertex, all of the connected edges move along with it, which can manipulate the shape in interesting ways. That's something we'll need to be able to do in 3D later, and it's definitely what we wanted for this example. So go ahead and hit escape. That will let go of that operation. Now click once on this right vertex to select it, press G for grab, and notice the difference here when you start moving it around. It is not connected to this right edge. And while that might not seem like a big deal right now, it means that ultimately it's not really connected to this underlying shape, which will present problems later in 3D when we're trying to create a 3D model and we have some edges and vertices that aren't connected. Go ahead and hit escape to let that go. So we'll need to fix this by connecting the vertex to the edge that it's touching. And here's how we do that. First, we need to give this vertex another vertex along the edge to connect to. So press 2 for the edge selection mode. Click once on this far right edge, right click on it and pick the option for subdivide. Then press 1 for vertex selection and click once in gray space. And now you see that you have a vertex on the right edge, and then you have the vertex that's overlapping this edge. So we need to slide this new vertex up so that it matches up with the original one here. So click once on this vertex to select it, press GG for slide, so you press G twice, and then slide it up until you see that you have that snap to that vertex, and go ahead and click to set it down. Now we just need to tell Blender to merge these two vertices. So first we need to select them both. And you might be tempted to drag a selection window around this vertex here and expect it to get both of them, but it's kind of like one is on top of the other. So this type of selection will only get what you see, which is the one on top. To get the other one behind it, you need to switch to wireframe mode. So in the upper right corner, where you have your different viewport shading modes, go ahead and click on the far left one for wireframe. Then go ahead and click and drag a selection window around the vertex you can see, and it'll also pick up the one behind it. Then right click on the selection and pick the option for merge vertices, and then pick the other option for by distance. Then you can switch back to solid view mode. And now with that vertex selected, press G for grab, and you'll notice that everything is all connected together. Go ahead and hit escape if you're following along with that. Okay, so now you know everything you need to know to try the single vertex challenge. And while you could draw any 2D shape, I challenge you to try this first. I want you to try to create a simple 2D floor plan based on this sketch. So I took some simple measurements around a room and drew them in here. Notice that this is wall thickness here, so this is all walls. And then we have a glass slider here, a glass slider here, and a window here. Notice that the different numbers are in inches, so 222 inches here, 192 here, 24, 84 for this slider opening, 24, 84 for this slider opening. This is a little blobby here, but this little bit is 6 inches. This little bit is 6 inches. This opening for this window is 40 inches. And you can tell this drawing is not to scale because this is 146 inches. This 6 here represents that the walls are 6 inches thick. So you can take a screenshot of the sketch, open a new file in Blender, and try to create it based on what you learn. So maybe you need to create 2D or 3D floor plans, or you can see how this would be helpful for rooms or structures. Or maybe this is something you would never do. You would never create a 2D floor plan. I still recommend that you go through with this particular challenge because it still will ingrain these fundamental skills you'll need no matter what you need to create later in Blender. So just make sure that when you're looking at this sketch that you draw the walls with their thickness. So that's the 6 inches here, as I said. And then you see all those dimensions that go around. Those are all in inches. Just be sure to constrain yourself to a 2D view and use only the tools that we've learned so far. And I recommend you pause the video right now and give it a try. And then once you come back, we'll walk through a solution together step by step. Okay, so you're all done? Let's go ahead and jump back into Blender and work on this together. So I'll flip back over to Blender and start a new file. There's no need to save the one that we were working on. And I'll move a little faster now that we understand all of the concepts. But you can always pause the video or jump backwards if I move too quickly. So let's get into it. Press X for the delete menu and then click to delete the cube. Then hold down Shift, press the letter A, and under the mesh menu, click to add a plane. Press 7 on the number pad or Z on the navigation gizmo to jump to a top orthographic view and roll the mouse wheel to zoom in a bit. Then press Tab to get into edit mode. Click once in Grayspace to deselect the vertices. Then with the Shift key held down, click on each of these 3 vertices here to select them. Then press X on your keyboard for the delete menu and click vertices to delete those 3 vertices. Now we have our one vertex to start. Next, set your units. So over on the right-hand side, click on the Scene Properties icon and switch your unit system from metric to imperial. And then your base units under length, switch those from feet to inches. Then come back over and click once on the vertex to select it. Press E for extrude, Y for the Y direction, type 6 for 6 inches, and press Enter to finish drawing that edge 6 inches up. And then we'll create a 6 inch by 6 inch square to represent the thickness of the walls here. And to create the square, rather than extruding edges all the way around, press 2 for edge selection, click once on the edge to select it, press E for extrude, then X for the X direction, and then press 6 for 6 inches and Enter to finish that. Notice that when you extrude that edge out, it brings a face along with it. Next, click on the top edge to select it. And if I flip back over to the sketch, we've got a 6 inch by 6 inch square that's this bottom left corner. And now I need this to go 192 inches. So flipping back over to Blender, press E for extrude, press Y for the Y direction, then type 192 and press Enter. Notice that it goes off the screen. So I'll roll my mouse wheel and then hold down Shift and click the center mouse button and pan the view until I can see everything that I'm working with here. Now we need another little 6 inch square up here. So press E, then Y, then 6, and then Enter. And we'll get that little square there. So now we'll be able to turn the corner and extrude along the top edge. Now flipping back over to the drawing, we're going to extrude in different increments here. So we're gonna do a 24 inch wall segment, then an 84 inch segment for the slider opening, then 24, then 84, and then this last little bit here is 6. It's kind of a blobby looking number, but that's 6 inches. So flipping back over to Blender, click on the right edge to select it, press E for extrude, X for the X direction, type 24 and press enter for 24 inches. And then we're just going to keep repeating these steps along the wall. Press E, press X, type 84 for the glass door opening, press enter. Then E, X, 24 for the next wall segment and press enter. E, X, 84 for the second slider opening and press enter. Then E, X, and 6 for the last little bit of wall there and press enter. Now we're also going to need another little 6-inch square here so that we can turn the corner and begin drawing this right wall. So one more time, E, X, 6, enter, and now we've got that little piece that will help us turn the corner. Flipping back over to the drawing, once we've turned this corner, we're going to go 6 inches down. That's this little blobby 6 here. 40 for the window opening and 146 the rest of the way. So flipping back over to Blender, click to select the bottom edge, press E, Y, and then we're going in the negative direction now. So you need to type -6 and press enter for this to go 6 inches down. Then repeat these steps over and over again. E, Y, -40 for the window opening and press enter. Then E, Y, -146 and press enter or return. Then we need the last little 6-inch square so we can turn the corner again and draw this final wall. So E, Y, -6, enter. Now flipping back over to the drawing, this wall is just one long segment, 222 inches. So flipping back over to Blender, click to select the left edge, E, X, and this is the negative X direction. So type -222 for 222 inches and press enter. Now we know that where these meet up here, so where this edge we just extruded over meets up with the other edge that was already there, we know that it's merely overlapping right now and that we actually need to merge it up. So let's go ahead and switch to wireframe mode in the upper left corner of your screen. Then pan and zoom as needed to get close in there. Press 1 for vertex selection, and then click to drag a selection window around both of these vertices. It will get the 2 on top as well as the 2 that are underneath. Then right click on the selection and pick the option for merge vertices by distance. And underneath the hood, this vertex merged up with the vertex underneath it, and the same for the top vertex here. It merged with the vertex underneath it. You can switch your view back to solid and then zoom back out and pan your view so you can see everything again. Okay, looking pretty good. The last step is to add the little bit of detail that will show us where those slider doors are and where the window is. So up here at the top rectangle, as I pan and zoom in, if I flip back over to the sketch, we see that there's this one long edge that's down the middle here horizontally, and then we have a little rectangle up top here and a little rectangle below it here. So let's first focus on getting this horizontal edge across the middle drawn in. So flipping back over to Blender, we need to be able to have a vertex on this edge and a vertex on this edge so that we can have one long edge drawn between the two. So press 2 for edge selection, click once on this left edge, right click, pick the option for subdivide, then repeat the steps on the other side. Select, right click, subdivide. Then press 1 for vertex selection, hold shift, and click on the right vertex to add it to the selection set. You can let go of the shift key and then press F to fill an edge between the two. Now we need to subdivide this edge so that we can extrude this side in this direction and the opposite side in the opposite direction. So right click on that edge and pick subdivide. And now you see that you have a new vertex in the middle here. This allows you to press 2 for edge selection. Click once on the left side of that edge to select only it. Press E for extrude, then Y for the Y direction, and then type 2 and press enter or return. Then let's do the same on the opposite side. Click once on the edge to select it, then press E for extrude, Y for the Y direction, and type -2 and press enter or return. Then click once in gray space to deselect. So you've got that little symbol drawn in, and while there are features in Blender to duplicate things, so we could duplicate this slider over to the other side, we're actually going to do it manually so we can re-ingrain these steps. So back over in Blender, we'll pan our view over, and let's repeat the same steps. There's going to be a few small little differences, but first go ahead and press the number 2 to make sure you're in edge selection mode, and this time click to select the left edge, then hold Shift and click to select the right edge. Then you can let go of the Shift key, and with both of those edges selected, right click and pick the option for subdivide. And here you subdivided them both, which gave them each a vertex, and it filled the edge in between. So it did that just a little bit faster for you. Next, click once on that middle edge to select it, right click and pick subdivide, and then click once on the left edge, press E, Y, 2, enter. Then click once on the right edge, press E, Y, -2, enter. And now let's just go over to the window symbol on the right. We'll notice that in the sketch, there's a line down the middle, and then it seems there's a little thickness to the left and a little thickness to the right. So flipping back over to Blender, let's use that trick we just figured out to subdivide and add the edge all at once. So press 2 to make sure you're in edge selection mode. Click once on the top edge, hold Shift, click again on the bottom edge, let go of Shift, and then right click on the selection and pick the option for subdivide. Then click once on the edge in the middle, press E, X, type 1, and press enter. Then click on the left of these two edges, which is that center edge again. Press E, X, -1, and press enter or return. And now you've extruded that to the opposite side. Now press 1 for vertex selection. Click once in gray space and pan your view over and zoom out a bit so you can see everything. And at this point, not only do you have a great start on a 2D floor plan, you also have a really good idea of the core fundamentals that go into vertices, edges, and faces, and how they connect up to create the two-dimensional meshes you'll need to create more complicated 3D models later. Now, from here, this could be a 2D drawing that you continue to develop, or this could be the basis for a 3D model. In fact, we have a video covering the 2D to 3D workflow here on our channel, and I recommend you check that out next. I'll add a link in the description. But for right now, I recommend you go back and try the Single Vertex challenge on more 2D shapes. And if this felt too easy, then try your hand at harder stuff. By constraining yourself to 2D, a single vertex, and just these few tools, you'll definitely supercharge your learning. And not only will you master these fundamental skills, but they'll be really useful for 3D later. And then once you're done challenging yourself, if you're serious about learning Blender, I recommend checking out our video course library. It's filled with $3,600 worth of professional grade Blender courses, including our complete Intro to Blender course, and you can check it out at blenderacademy.com. And if you're not ready for our courses just yet, be sure to watch this tutorial next. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Leave me a comment below also to let me know if you have any feedback or questions. And until next time, happy blending!